I'm going to start with a plane. Planes are very simple. We just click and drag. No other things to define. Now I'm going to go into the Modify tab and look at its properties and press F4 so I can see my wireframe. Now, by default, the plane came in with a ton of cuts. Came in with 4 length segments and 4 width segments. I'd just like 1. So the plan here is to kind of make the shape of the handle with this plane and then shell it, because doing that is actually going to be easier than making the shape with a big rectangular prism. So I usually do one subdivision on stuff and then add the subdivisions I need as I'm modeling. So I'm going to go ahead and convert this to an editable poly and just check the proportions here. And that might be a little long. Okay. Now I want this handle to kind of have a bend to it, and I want it to go up a little bit. So first of all, I'm going to move the base of the handle close to the pan. And I'm going to go into edge mode. We haven't really used this mode yet, but it simply selects edges between verts. And we're going to learn a new tool called the Connect tool. This tool is very useful. In other programs, if you've used other 3D programs, this is kind of like an insert edge loop. So here's where we'll find the Connect tool. And I believe Connect is edge specific. So a lot of these tools that we're using are component specific. Just be sure you're in the right mode to use them. And I'm going to press Connect. And you'll notice that it drew a little edge perpendicular to the 2 edges I had selected. So if I had these edges selected and press Connect, you'll notice it drew a line perpendicular to those. And if I selected all 3 of these edges and press Connect, it drew a line through all 3 of those edges. So you can see that Connect essentially adds a cut perpendicular to your selection. Now, I believe Connect is a pretty silly name for this. That really doesn't remind me of connecting at all. I would think it would be called like insert edge loop, like every other program calls it. But there you have it. That's Mac's terminology. So since I want to give this a little bit of a bend, here I have 1 connection. And suppose we want to add 2 cuts in 1 pass. Well, we can do that. We can do that by clicking on this little black box, the settings for the Connect. Now, you'll notice that a lot of tools we've already used have these little boxes, and these little boxes are just going to give us parametric control over the tool. So you see we can increase the amount of cuts we want. We have a couple other sliders like this pinch slider, and we have also this kind of offset slider. So sometimes these little black boxes to bring up the parametric dialog can give you more control over the tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click the check to confirm that. So while staying in edge mode, I can just kind of drag up these edges and define a contour for the handle. I'm dragging on the Z here, being sure to only drag on the Z. Now we have kind of a bowed handle. Maybe we want it to go down a little more. Now I want to add a little hole, as pan handles often have, in the very end here. So I'm just going to select these 2 edges and use a Connect dialog to get myself 2 cuts. Now by default, Connect will do whatever you put in last into the dialog box. So if you at one point wanted 7, then your next connection is going to have 7 if you just click on the button without using the dialog box. So we want to. Now we can choose where we want our hole just by kind of moving these around. Now I want to add 2 more slits down the length of this. We could select each edge, or we could drag a marquee straight down the middle, or we could do something even better. which is called a ring selection. We simply select one edge, and then we click here, ring, or the hotkey for that is Alt-R, and ring is going to select every edge parallel to the edge you have selected in kind of a ring fashion. So I can demonstrate on this pan. Now we can't just click on the pan. Remember, we have to click on editable, click on editable poly first, then click on the pan. We can go into edge mode and click an edge and just press Alt-R, and you'll notice it selected the entire ring of edges. We can also do a loop, which will basically just select all the contiguous edges. So now I'm going to select my first edge and press Alt-R, and then I'm going to do a connection. Now the hotkey for connect is actually Control-Shift-E, which is kind of a lot of buttons, but you get used to it. So there we go. Since our last connection had 2 slices, it gave us 2 slices, which is perfectly what we wanted. So now I can just delete out this hole. Very nice. Now I can jump back up to editable poly and add our fancy shell modifier. And now we have a nice thick handle. However, our handle is pretty boxy. I don't know about you, but I have never seen a handle that boxy in the real life. So I'm going to make it a little bit more rounded. And I'm going to do that with a modifier called Turbosmooth. Now you notice that we can stack modifiers on top of each other, and that is part of the power of the modifier stack. So you see we have parts of our handle that are rounded in places that we don't want it to be rounded. That's just kind of how the Turbosmooth works. We can refine our shape by adding cuts. So if I go back into sub-object mode here, and I'm going to press F4 again so that I can see my wireframe. Oops. If I make a connection and move that connection very close to the edge, you'll notice that if we jump back up to Turbosmooth, we have a bit of a sharper cut there, because now it's interpolating faces only in between those 2 edges, which is a much smaller distance. Therefore, we have a much sharper edge here. And that's kind of how we can control the Turbosmooth. If you just start messing around with it, you will get the hang of how this modifier works. So another spot that needs refinement with this Turbosmooth is probably the area around the hole. Maybe just right here, right below the hole, looks a little bit wonky. So when I go into edge mode, we can use this show end result on to actually show us the results as we're working. So when we do select these edges and then do the connection, we can actually see the results updating in real time. So that's cool. And I think that is probably good. Now, suppose we actually wanted to work on all these polygons that we're seeing here. We could very easily right-click on this thing and convert it to an editable poly again, and it would actually smash this thing into raw mesh information the same way that it does to our primitives. So we could do it to the pan as well if we wanted to. Just going to move this a little bit closer. And there's our handle. Very simple. Now finally, I want to add these little rivets that connect our handle. So to do those, I'm thinking just the top part of a sphere will be sufficient. So I'll make a sphere, convert that sphere to an editable poly, and then I can use one of my orthographic views here to simply select a bunch of polygons and delete them. Now we have a nice little dome for our rivet here. We can just kind of move it into position. And I am noticing that our rivet might be a bit too spherical here. We probably want a flatter rivet. But now, since we've rotated it, if we try to scale it, our shape is going to become all askew. So up here in the top bar where we see view, we have all of these different modes, and these are relative coordinate systems for our transformations to happen on. We had been in view all this time, but we can also choose local. And local and view and perhaps world are probably going to be our most common ones here. And local will just, as you can see, now my scale gizmo is orientated with the direction of the sphere. And now we can simply scale it down a bit and we have ourselves a flatter rivet. You'll notice that if I go into rotate mode, our rotation gizmo is still orientated upright. That's because these coordinate systems are chosen on a per transformation level. So if we change our rotate to local, then our rotation gizmo will be orientated that way from then on. But our move is still orientated to view. And it doesn't have to be, it can just kind of float there. That's probably fine. Then I'm just going to shift drag ourselves the other one. They're looking a little big. By the way, to frame your selection, you can simply press the Z key. That stands for Zoom Extents All. If we don't have a selection and we press the Z key, it kind of frames everything in our scene. So the Z key is a good key to keep in mind. It also resets your camera pivot for your arc rotating. So if at any point you feel like you're rotating around some point you don't want to be rotating around and things are just askew and your zooming is not going well, then you can simply make a selection and press Z and that'll reset everything. So there we have it. That is our pan. Let me just press F4 to hide the wireframe. The last thing I'm going to do is just give these guys some quick color. I'll give the metal parts like a gray and the pan. I think I'll add a custom color and do a really dark gray here, but not black. And there we are. Model complete.